If you really want to understand like the origins of modern food preservation, or even the mechanics of your own gut microbiome,
Right.
and even, the foundational chemistry of gourmet cooking, you don't actually need to look in some high-tech laboratory.
No, definitely not.
You just need to look at that dusty, neglected bottle of liquid sitting in the back of your pantry right now.
Yeah. I mean, it is entirely possible that right next to your olive oil sits one of the most significant biochemical achievements of ancient human history.
Just waiting to be splashed onto a side salad.
Exactly. Just sitting there.
Welcome to the deep dive. So today our mission for you is to explore this modern renaissance of a thousands of years old pantry staple. We are talking about vinegar,
Yes, we are.
and we are pulling our insights today from a really, really highly detailed article by Gregory David. It's over at My Whole Foods, and it's titled "The Vinegar Renaissance: From Gut Health to Culinary Magic."
It's a fantastic piece.
It really is, and we aren't just going to list off recipes today. That's not what this is about. We are looking at this through the lens of cellular biology and chemistry, really tracking how this substance is currently capturing the attention of, both gourmet chefs and clinical researchers alike.
Yeah, because it serves as this perfect example of modern science sort of mapping the mechanics of ancient traditions.
Right.
We finally have the clinical vocabulary to explain the profound, measurable effects that this liquid has on our internal ecosystems
Yeah.
and, alongside the transformative structural applications it has in our daily cooking.
So whether you are, say, a culinary enthusiast looking to elevate the structural integrity of your meals, or maybe you're just someone trying to optimize your digestion.
Right, by understanding the actual clinical data.
Exactly. Cutting through that endless wellness influencer noise, this deep dive is going to give you practical, science-backed insights that you can apply immediately in your own kitchen.
And it all starts, I think, with recognizing that vinegar is not a static ingredient.
Mm.
It is the byproduct of a living microscopic ecosystem.
All right, so let's unpack this, because before we get into the functional health claims or the culinary applications, we really need to establish the baseline biochemistry
The
here.
foundation, yeah.
Like, why does vinegar act the way it does? And the My Whole Foods piece, it details this as a two-step fermentation process. So step one is something human beings have been deeply familiar with for millennia.
Oh, absolutely.
You take a natural sugar source, so crushed grapes, apples, or grains.
Right.
You introduce yeasts, and those yeasts, they consume the sugars, and they basically output ethanol as a byproduct.
Yeah, and that first step, that is the foundational mechanism for wine, for cider, for beer. It's anaerobic respiration.
Right.
But the second step is where the real transformation into a culinary staple actually occurs. Because once that ethanol is present, a highly specialized group of bacteria called Acetobacter takes over.
And these are aerobic bacteria, right? Like, they require oxygen to function.
Yes, exactly.
Which is why, if you leave a bottle of wine open on the counter, it eventually just turns.
Precisely. The Acetobacter literally feeds on the ethanol that was produced by the yeast, and then through oxidation, it converts it into acetic acid.
See, and what's fascinating to me is reading how this biological process isn't just about, creating a tart flavor profile. The article makes it so clear that the creation of acetic acid is actually an evolutionary defense mechanism.
It really is.
But how does that actually work at a cellular level? Like, we know it lowers the pH, making the liquid highly acidic,
Right.
but why does a low pH suddenly make food safe to store for months without refrigeration?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the acetic acid molecule is highly adept at penetrating the cell membranes of competing pathogens.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so when you lower the pH of an environment, you're basically increasing the concentration of hydrogen ions. And when those ions just flood the environment, they cross the lipid bilayer.
The sort of outer shell.
Exactly, the outer shell of those food-spoiling bacteria. And once they get inside those competing bacterial cells, the acid lowers their internal pH,
Right.
which essentially denatures their vital enzymes. I mean, it completely shuts down their cellular machinery.
So the Acetobacter is effectively establishing a biochemical fortress.
So that's a great way to put it, yeah.
It just floods the zone with acid to kill off any competing microbes, securing the food source all for itself.
Exactly. It's biological warfare on a microscopic scale.
That is wild.
And human beings, we realized thousands of years ago that we could harness this localized defense mechanism.
Right.
By submersing our harvests, vegetables, fruits, meats, in this highly acidic environment, we hijack the Acetobacter's fortress.
Just to preserve our food supply through, Brutal winter.
Brutal winters, long ocean voyages, and this was long, long before the concept of a refrigerator even existed.
Which means that really sharp, pungent smell you get when you uncap a bottle of vinegar, that is literally the smell of an ancient biological defense mechanism.
It literally is.
It's crazy. But this brings us to a really interesting divergence in the My Whole Foods article, because we've established this universal baseline, right? Yeast turns sugar to alcohol, and acetobacter turns alcohol to acetic acid.
Right, that's the constant.
But the global tour of vinegars that the author takes us on, it shows these wildly different results based on the starting material.
Yeah, the substrate. So the substrate, the original source of carbohydrates, dictates the entire trajectory of the final product.
Okay.
The base acid remains the same, but the surrounding chemical matrix, it changes entirely.
So let's trace that matrix for a second. We start with apple cider vinegar, or ACV. The substrate there is fermented apple juice.
Right.
And the resulting vinegar is golden, relatively mild. It has a very clean, tangy profile.
Very clean, yeah.
The article highlights this as like the current darling of the gut health movement.
Oh, absolutely.
But then you look at Italian balsamic vinegar.
Right.
Traditional balsamic uses a substrate of Trebbiano grape juice.
Specifically the pressed juice. Yeah,
Yeah.
the must.
Right, the must. And it's dark, it's syrupy, incredibly complex, and it balances this intense sweetness with the acidity.
And then if we cross over into traditional Chinese cuisine, we find black vinegar,
Right.
which shifts away from fruit entirely. The substrate here relies on fermented grains, so sorghum, millet, wheat, or rice.
Okay.
The resulting liquid is deeply dark. But instead of that syrupy sweetness of balsamic, it has a really distinct malty, umami-rich profile,
Right.
which is structurally essential for things like dumpling sauces or rich, savory braises.
But wait, if the underlying engine, the acetobacter converting alcohol to acetic acid, is identical in all three of these scenarios,
Okay, it is.
why does a Trebbiano grape yield this like luxurious dessert drizzle, while an apple yields a bright morning tonic and sorghum yields a malty, savory cooking staple? Like, how does that happen?
It basically comes down to the complex carbohydrates and the proteins that are present in the substrate, and that is compounded by the aging environment.
Okay, break that down.
Let's look at black vinegar first. Because you are starting with grains rather than simple fruit sugars, you are introducing proteins into the fermentation process.
Ah.
As those grains ferment, the proteins break down into amino acids.
Right.
And those amino acids undergo slow reactions over time, very similar to the Maillard reaction that browns a steak, you know?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that is what develops that deep, savory, umami flavor. Apples simply don't have that protein structure to break down.
So ACV just remains bright and clean.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes perfect sense for the grains. But what about balsamic? Because grapes are fruit, just like apples, yet they end up worlds apart.
Well, that divergence is heavily driven by the aging environment. Traditional balsamic isn't just fermented, it is aged.
Right.
For years, often decades, in a succession or bateria of different wooden barrels.
Oh, like oak and chestnut?
Oak, chestnut, cherry,
Yeah.
juniper, they cycle through all of them,
Wait, so the wood itself is basically acting as an active ingredient in the chemical matrix.
actively and passively, yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, passively, the wood is porous. So it allows for a very slow, deliberate evaporation of the water content over decades.
Oh, which concentrates it.
Exactly. It dramatically concentrates both the residual grape sugars and the acetic acid. That's what gives it that thick, syrupy viscosity.
Right.
And then actively, the vinegar is actually extracting tannins and complex flavor compounds directly from the wood grain.
That is so cool.
Yeah, whereas apple cider vinegar is typically produced rapidly, usually in stainless steel or large vats.
Right. They aren't aging it in wood for 20 years.
No, because they are prioritizing the sharp, clean bite of the acid over the deep, concentrated complexity that you get from long-term evaporation.
That distinction, it just beautifully illustrates how the exact same biological mechanism can be manipulated by human engineering.
It really is an art form.
Which, honestly, transitions us perfectly to the next major section of the article. Because that same acetic acid that interacts with oak barrels and breaks down grain proteins, it has a similarly profound interaction when we introduce it into our own internal environment.
Well, we are, after all, just another biological ecosystem.
Exactly. And the article moves from the pantry straight to the gut microbiome.
Right.
You know, that massive community of trillions of microorganisms living in our intestines, which we now know dictates everything from, like, nutrient absorption to immune function.
It's basically the control center.
Yeah. And the claim laid out by my Whole Foods is that the acetic acid in vinegar actively modulates this internal ecosystem, specifically by promoting the growth of lactobacillus.
Which is a highly beneficial bacterial strain.
Right.
Yeah, so when you consume an unpasteurized vinegar, particularly one with the mother,
That cloudy web of stuff at the bottom.
yes, that cloudy web of cellulose and beneficial bacteria, when you consume that, you are essentially introducing a prebiotic and probiotic complex straight into your digestive tract. You are actively altering the pH of your digestive environment in a way that favors beneficial microbes over harmful ones. It's very much like how it protects food in a jar.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, because the author doesn't just rely on general microbiome theory here. They cite actual, specific clinical literature.
Yes, they do.
We're looking at a 2004 study published in Diabetes Care demonstrating vinegar's ability to improve insulin sensitivity,
Right.
alongside a 2007 study in BMC gastroenterology focusing on its ability to delay gastric emptying.
And that 2007 study on delayed gastric emptying, that is actually the mechanical key to understanding the 2004 study on insulin.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, gastric emptying is simply the rate at which your stomach releases food into your small intestine.
Right.
And the small intestine is where nutrients and sugars are actually absorbed into the bloodstream.
So, by slowing down the pyloric sphincter, the valve between the stomach and the intestine, the acetic acid, is effectively metering the release of carbohydrates.
Precisely. Think about it. If you eat a highly refined carbohydrate meal, your stomach usually processes it very quickly.
Right, it just blasts right through.
Exactly. Dumping a massive load of glucose into your small intestine all at once. This causes a severe spike in blood sugar, which then demands a massive spike in insulin to clear it.
And over time, that constant spiking is what can lead to insulin resistance.
Yes. But by introducing acetic acid, you slow down that emptying process.
Okay.
The carbohydrates are released gradually. The resulting glucose curve is flattened out, which significantly reduces the demand on your pancreas to produce insulin.
That is just a brilliant mechanical explanation of how a basic pantry staple acts on human biology.
It is elegant chemistry.
It is, but I do want to let me push back a bit here.
Yeah?
Because if you look at the wellness space online, the claims go way, way beyond just flattening glucose curves.
Oh, I know.
You have influencers out there claiming a daily shot of ACV will cure severe acid reflux, miraculously dissolve belly fat, and completely reset your digestive system. Is this just a case of the internet running away with a sliver of truth, or is vinegar really a magic health bullet for the gut?
Well, this raises an important question, and it's where we really must apply rigorous critical thinking for the listener.
Yeah.
The clinical data on gastric emptying and mild improvements in insulin sensitivity, that is robust.
Right, that's real.
But as the My Whole Foods article explicitly states, more extensive clinical research is required before we can responsibly label vinegar a primary medical treatment for something as complex as acid reflux.
Especially considering that acid reflux is often caused by a weakened esophageal sphincter, right? Not necessarily a lack of stomach acid, which seems to be the common internet theory.
Exactly. I mean, pouring more acid into an already irritated esophagus can, in many cases, actually exacerbate the issue.
Ouch. Yeah, that makes sense.
We have to view vinegar as a functional tool for biological balance, not an isolated cure-all.
Right.
It provides excellent structural support for your microbiome, but it cannot outwork a fundamentally poor diet.
You can't just drink a shot of ACV and eat fast food all day.
Exactly. Nor can it supersede targeted medical treatments. It works in synergy with the food you eat, not in isolation.
Which I think brings us perfectly to the final and arguably most practical section of our deep dive today.
A kitchen.
Yes. We've talked about how acetic acid breaks down the cellular walls of pathogens and how it meters the release of food from our stomach. Well, it turns out that ability to physically alter biological structures is the exact same mechanism we exploit on our kitchen counters.
It is.
The article calls this culinary magic.
Because it is chemistry applied to the dining table, and the mechanisms, they're just incredibly elegant.
So let's start with marinades. We all know, like, splashing some vinegar on a tough cut of meat makes it taste better.
Sure.
But the article points out it's actually altering the physical structure of the food.
It goes right back to the concept of denaturing, similar to how the acid acts on bacterial cells. When you apply acetic acid to a tough cut of meat, the acid actually attacks the tightly wound coils of protein fibers.
Oh,
It
wow.
causes those protein structures to unwind and relax.
Meaning the meat literally softens before heat is ever even applied.
It softens, but it also creates structural gaps.
What do you mean?
Well, as those proteins unwind, they sort of loosen up, and they trap water and flavor compounds from the marinade within their matrix.
Oh, so you aren't just making the meat easier to chew.
No, you are functionally increasing its moisture retention during the cooking process.
That is brilliant.
Though I will say, you have to be careful. If you leave it in the acid too long, those proteins will actually tighten back up, and that turns the meat mushy and chalky.
Ah, so it's a very delicate chemical balance.
Very much so.
And the article explores how that balance extends to creating complex vinaigrettes or reductions, using the umami of black vinegar or the sweetness of balsamic to counteract the fat of roasted meats.
Right, finding that harmony.
But the application that completely caught my attention, the one that blew my mind, was baking.
Ah, yes, the acid-base reaction. It is a total cornerstone of pastry science.
Right. The author notes that combining vinegar with baking soda in a batter produces carbon dioxide, giving cakes their rise.
Yes.
Wait, so a tablespoon of vinegar in a cake batter is basically acting like a stealthy culinary ninja? Like, it puffs up the cake with carbon dioxide and then vanishes without leaving a single sour trace.
It really is.
I actually dug into the history on this a bit while reading the source material. This technique exploded in popularity during the Great Depression and World War II.
Go with wacky cake.
Exactly, with wacky cake. When standard leavening agents and eggs and dairy were, heavily rationed or just entirely unavailable.
Yeah, bakers had to figure out how to give a cake structural lift without eggs or commercial yeast.
Right, so they relied on a primary school chemistry experiment.
They did.
They used sodium bicarbonate baking soda and activated it with just a splash of standard white or apple cider vinegar.
The mechanics of it are brilliant.
Yeah.
Sodium bicarbonate is highly alkaline. Acetic acid is obviously acidic.
Right.
The moment they meet in the wet batter, they neutralize each other. And the byproduct of that chemical neutralization is a rapid release of carbon dioxide gas.
So the batter traps those carbon dioxide bubbles, creating this temporary chemical scaffolding.
Exactly.
The scaffolding that holds the cake up until the heat of the oven can cook the flour and set the crumb structure permanently.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a prime example of why understanding the chemistry of your pantry is so empowering.
Yeah.
Because the acid and the base completely neutralize each other during the reaction, there is absolutely no lingering sour taste in the final chocolate cake.
None at all.
It acts as a stealth leavening agent.
Yeah.
You don't need highly processed synthetic chemicals to achieve a highly technical culinary result.
Right.
Not when you have a natural, biologically active ingredient that performs the exact same function just through basic chemistry.
It is doing the heavy lifting completely invisibly. I mean, it's an acidifier, it's a protein tenderizer, a pathogen destroyer, and a covert leavening agent.
All in one bottle.
All derived from the simple biological process of leaving some crushed fruit or grain exposed to the air.
It really demands a level of respect for the ingredient that goes far, far beyond a simple salad dressing.
Absolutely. So, what does this all mean for you listening? To distill our journey today, vinegar is not just static storage, it is an ancient, living powerhouse.
It is.
It is a tool that modulates our internal microbiome by altering our internal pH and supporting lactobacillus.
Right.
It effectively manages our blood glucose by chemically slowing our gastric emptying. And it acts as a molecular toolkit in our kitchens, denaturing tough proteins and providing chemical scaffolding for our baking.
And for anyone listening who wants to move this from theory into practice, the My Whole Foods article has a great suggestion.
Oh, yeah, the tasting selection.
Yeah, they suggest building a small, intentional tasting selection at home.
Right.
Source a raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar for its probiotic benefits. Find a properly barrel-aged balsamic to understand how wood tannins and evaporation concentrate flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And secure a traditional black vinegar to really experiment with the savory, amino acid-rich profile of fermented grains.
Right.
Understanding these different matrices will completely elevate your nutritional approach and your culinary technique.
It is the literal definition of a renaissance, taking an ancient tradition and validating it with modern biochemical science.
It is. Which actually leaves me with a thought I've been kind of turning over in my head since we started analyzing these mechanisms today.
All right, what's that?
Well, if a process as rudimentary as allowing fruit juice to ferment can yield a substance that actively alters human cellular biology and fundamentally transforms the structural integrity of our food,
Yeah.
What other humble, forgotten pantry staples are sitting in the dark right now, just waiting for modern science to finally unlock their hidden superpowers?
Man, that is exactly the kind of question that makes you look at your kitchen shelves with a completely renewed sense of respect.
Absolutely.
The dust is gone. It's all just untapped potential now. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time.